Hey guys, it's Echo, and welcome back to Pokopia. We're trying something a little different this time and doing a voiceover at the end instead of live commentary. It should make some of the moments like building a house or replacing roads a little more entertaining, but you'll have to let me know what you think. I started my day with grabbing my daily stamp while ignoring Professor Tangrowth's attempt at grabbing my attention. It was a Squirtle, delightful. I quickly finished a Pokecoin task I forgot to gather last time and bought the daily recipe, some delectable hardwood flooring. Then it was time to talk to the professor. They didn't have much to say. I wasn't super clear on why they specifically asked for my attention, but it doesn't really matter. I have things to do, dang it! First thing I did was head towards the cave Squirtle pointed out to me before, where I stumbled on Drifloon wandering around without a house or home. They requested a habitat for them to move into, citing a desire to live close to everyone else so they wouldn't be lonely anymore, and I, like a good little ditto, proceeded to ignore their request entirely for the time being in favor of picking up a Pokeball. But just before I could pick it up, Professor Tangrowth interrupted with a phone call. I guess they got bored and started pushing random buttons until something happened, and they called me. Proud to have gotten the hang of using the PC, they promptly hung up on me, having to call me back and making the dutiful request to come with me if I decided to leave the area. But here's the thing. I don't know what possessed me to do this, but I decided I was going to get each area to comfort level 10 before I moved on. In my personal save, I wanted to get all of the recipes, all of the abilities, and all of the Pokemon before ever starting to get serious in building, and I ended up overwhelmed with choice and lack of direction. So this time, I'm making myself slow down. I'll level up each area to its maximum level before I move on, and will focus my efforts on reparation instead of completely rebuilding everything from scratch. But first, to explore the cave. As I walked deeper inside, I heard someone calling out to me. It sounded like they were in trouble, so I did what any sane person would do and wandered aimlessly around the cave, gathering materials and opening the spring to fill it with some water. I found a Pokeball too. It had a smooth rock inside. Once I was done taking my sweet time, I finally started to clear out the rocks blocking my path. Stuck inside the cave was Onix. This was the Pokemon who would be able to help me build the Pokemon Center. Unfortunately, neither they nor I could break the stones keeping them stuck inside, so they suggested I go back to Professor Tangrowth to ask for ideas. But I wanted to clear out all the rocks in the cave first. The area with the glowing mushrooms and the small waterfall is beautiful. I already know I want to move someone in here, although I don't really know who yet. Behind the first rock wall was a Pokeball with a torch. Not the most useful, but maybe I can use it to decorate the beach later or something similar. Behind the second wall was another cave, which led to a third stone wall. It also had a journal that taught me Missy's hairstyle, which I immediately equipped. I like the little side ponytail. Behind the final stone wall was actually some dirt leading into open air. Punching through it, I made a second cave entrance from behind the Pokemon Center back to Onix's cave. Nothing quite beats a shortcut. Unfortunately, Professor Tangrowth was not at the Pokemon Center. They had wandered down in front of another rock wall I needed to smash through, and they were not going to hear about whatever was bothering me. They were much too curious about the rock wall despite not caring about it at all until this very moment. I suppose they really were bored. Smashing through the wall brought us to a beach with a large, very suspicious tower and a Magikarp. The Magikarp explained to me that it wanted a fishing spot to live at, which makes me question their sanity, but to each their own, and I once again ignored a Pokemon's very reasonable request to live in a house, and instead followed Professor Tangrowth up to investigate the tower. Turns out the tower can talk, is super suspicious, and wanted some berries. Giving it berries got me a boulder badge, which is cool, I guess? Pretty useless overall, but maybe I can decorate Professor Tangrowth's house with the badges someday. Speaking of houses, I found a wooden plank bridge recipe in the old dilapidated house on the beach. Then, on my way back, I watered the entire path to the Poke Center. It seems random and unnecessary, but trust me, it is going to make my life so much easier in just a few minutes. I met Pinsir, who apparently hates Heracross, and finally spoke to Professor Tangrowth to make a plan about Onix. They gathered everybody together to make a plan, which actually consisted of Squirtle, Bulbasaur, and Charmander, and we decided that in order to free Onix, we needed to make it rain. And in order to make it rain, we needed a Slowpoke. So I grabbed myself a chair for Magikarp and meandered my way back to the beach to grab Slowpoke. I met Slowpoke in the beachside grass, then convinced Magikarp to teach me their greatest move of all time. Jump! Well, to be fair to Magikarp, I couldn't jump before they taught me, so I really have no room to judge them for the lack of talent. With that freshly out of the way, I asked Slowpoke to come yawn for us, but they declared that they would need a really good path to make it to the Pokemon Center. Which is why I watered all the soil on the way there. They also taught me a wooden stair recipe. After building a set of stairs and watering a bit more grass, I gathered Slowpoke up and started to slowly walk them to the Pokemon Center. But despite the painfully slow pace, we made it safe and sound, and Professor Tangrowth filled us all in on the plan. Basically, the goal was to get a 100-point yawn. If Slowpoke gave a really good, hearty yawn, then it would rain, but they weren't particularly inclined to yawn past a 70-point yawn without a lot more humidity. You can get humidity points by having watered trees, lakes, and rivers, so opening any springs, watered grass and ground instead of the barren grass and ground, and having a water Pokemon do a rain dance. So I set to work. First, Professor Tangrowth asked me to water some ground, which I used as an opportunity to start leveling out the hills that I didn't really want to stay around. I took a quick break to eavesdrop on Squirtle and Bulbasaur, who discovered that they used to live near the same pond. Talk about adorable! Once they were done talking to Squirtle, Bulbasaur asked me to plant a large flower bed to raise the humidity. I quickly did so with their help, creating a new habitat. Then Slowpoke explained about opening springs to add water, which I had already done. Bulbasaur taught me that trees can increase humidity, Slowpoke complimented my fountain, and Squirtle finally taught me how to make a rain dance site. Thankfully, Professor Tangrowth already had the dolls required for the party, so I raided their stash to find them, set up a little spot for Squirtle, and they set to work eating and staring intently at the dolls. Once they were done, Slowpoke yawned for us again, and we finally got the legendary 100-point yawn. Now here, I walked away to get myself some lunch. Once Slowpoke gets it to rain, you can hydrate a lot of your ground by just leaving it on the first line of dialogue looking out over your land while it rains. The rain is going to stop very shortly after talking to Slowpoke, but I wanted to limit the amount I would have to water my ground as much as possible, so I just left it while I left and ate some food. I had leftover grilled chicken, mashed potatoes, and Brussels sprouts. It was delicious. Once I had let it rain for a solid 20 minutes, I came back to let the dialogue finish out, and the rain, of course, immediately stopped. Slowpoke was no longer tired enough to make it rain, but we all heard a distant roar. I ran with the others to check it out, and it was Kyogre. Impressed with the fact that we had made it rain, they decided to befriend us, explaining that they had been gone for a long time because they had grown irritated with the humans and gone to take a nap. Which was fair enough, I suppose, but now that they were back, it was raining for real, and it was time to talk to Onyx. They asked for me to punch them out because they were too tired to do it themselves, and so I did, breaking them free and heading back to the Pokemon Center with them in tow to thank Professor Tangrowth for their idea. They then asked me to build them a house, which I added to the back of my house building to-do list, and then I set a bunch of Pokemon to building the Pokemon Center. With the Pokemon Center finally being constructed, I started on some more upkeep-style to-do list items. I leveled out the 2 hills in the middle of the walkway in front of the Pokemon Center. I wanted the area to feel more open and accessible and clean. While I was working on that, Charmander requested I build them a leaf den to live in. A slight irritation, given I don't even want the leaf den I'm currently living in to stay, but I can't blame them. The rain literally puts their life at risk. For anyone watching who doesn't know, according to Pokemon canon, if the fire on Charmander's tail goes out, it dies. But, as is my habit, I did not start building Charmander a place to live. Instead, I went back to knocking down the hills I didn't want around anymore. I eavesdropped on Charmander and Pidgey having a conversation about the ability to fly versus breathe fire. Charmander wanted to grow up to be able to do both. Good news for them, if they start fighting a bunch of other Pokemon, they should be able to grow up and do both as a Charizard. After finally finishing knocking down the first hill, I received an anxious request from Professor Tangrowth. Raise the comfort level of the area to 5. Joke's on them, like I said before, I don't plan to leave this place until the comfort level is 10. Right now we're only at level 3, so we have a long way to go. After that conversation, I got right back to digging, very quickly removing the second hill that I wanted removed. Then I headed down to the garden, picked some beans, and watered a bunch of the dirt. In one of the houses down this little corridor-like space, I found the ninja outfit, which I did not continue to wear. It looks cool, but isn't really the vibe I'm going for. But I had it, and that makes me happy. So on I went, filled with renewed vigor. Maybe too much vigor. This is when I went back to Onyx's cave, which has been softened into squishy clay, and thought to myself, I should clear that clay out. Won't it be so much nicer with all of it gone and all that space opened up? 2 hours later, and I did not think to show off how the cave looks without the clay. Instead, opting to go punch out some stone wall I had found in the floor of the next cave over. It led to some Pokemetal and a glowing mushroom. Then I decided to give a beautiful walkthrough of what the cave looks like. It's definitely more open, and I will not have to gather clay for a very, very, very long time. I still don't know what I would say it was worth it with all the abilities I currently have, but it's done now. I went ahead and made Onyx their habitat, checking off the second in the long line of Pokemon waiting for new homes, then thought, why not get a little fancy? I could make them a pretty nice house here in the cave, honestly. Sure, it's a little cruel to make Onyx live in the cave they were trapped in for a long time, but it's so nice and fancy these days, and it won't ever rain on them. While I was making the decorations to do just that, Vespiquen moved in. They are an incredibly powerful and important Pokemon in Pokopia, as they have the ability to trade a unique piece of furniture for 3 pieces of honey up to 4 times a day. I'm not actually super good at being consistent with that, but I will be using them from time to time, pretty much whenever I remember and have the honey. They and Kobe are also 2 of my favorite Pokemon, so they'll be getting a very nice house as soon as I can. But first, I went and finished decorating Onyx's house, and after all of my hyping it up, they got a desk and a single flower. Listen, it's not a fancy house, but in my defense, I have very little in the way of recipes. I haven't gotten any big beds or anything like that just yet. The next day, the Pokemon Center had been completed, and I took Onyx back to their house. I then gathered up Drifloon to finally make their house. You're welcome, Drifloon. My daily stamp was a Charizard, and then Drifloon asked me for a doll. I had found an Eevee doll earlier when clearing out the passage towards the bean garden, so I gave it to them. I took some time to clean up some of the path around the Pokemon Center, then started building up the little fenced area behind the Pokemon Center. This was going to be Vespiquen and Combe's house. I put a field of flowers and a pretty flower bed inside, moved Vespiquen and Combe into the appropriate habitats, then started putting in a few decorations. I put in a light, a bed, a desk, a pot of flowers, and then the environment level increased. The last time I was this pumped in this run, I went and dug out hundreds of blocks of squishy clay. After getting the money and the recipes, I started knocking down the ruined house next to the Pokemon Center, building back up a really simple hut with a straw roof to move timber into. The only trouble is, earlier in the day I had set them to building a leaf hut for Charmander, so I couldn't move them in. To pass the time while I waited for the hut to finish, they take about 15 minutes, I decided to start to replace the roads. I do not like the brick roads in Withering Wasteland. I find they are too bright against the otherwise moody, cozy, woodland aesthetic. So I settled on wooden floorboards. I got a lot done too. In the time it took for the leaf hut to finish, I had finished most of the painting in front of the Pokemon Center. Once I moved Charmander into the new leaf hut with some simple furniture, I breathed a bit of a sigh of relief. That was all of the requested housing done. Now it was just my own whimsies that carried me forward. And my whimsies had me eavesdrop on Drifloon and Slowpoke, who had a whole conversation about forgetting what they were talking about. It was certainly a conversation that they had. Then I worked on switching over a few more roads, completed some more challenges for Pokecoins, and that was pretty much it. Next week, I'll be working towards at least comfort level 5, if not level 10. I'm really enjoying focusing on restoration rather than total rebuilding, so that's pretty fun. Anyways, if you want to see more from this journey and liked the new editing style, consider subscribing so you can see what I do next. Catch you all in the next one.